Hi, I've had some questions around a good method to find the LCM, which is the lowest common multiple. This comes into play at the beginning of level E in Kuman, where we're trying to find the LCM in order to add fractions. Okay, the first thing I would say is don't overcomplicate it. If you know your tables, and by looking at the numbers, then you can figure out in your own head what the lowest common multiple is. For example, if you look at these two, so we're trying to find the lowest common multiple of 12 and 8. Well, then what I would do in my head looking at this is I would take 12, the biggest number, and I would multiply it by 2 and see if that number works. So 2 12s are 24. Does 8 go into 24? Yes, it does. Therefore, the LCM of 12 and 8 is 24. And that's a very simple calculation you can do in your own head without having to go through, steps or anything like that. And that's absolutely fine. So if you're the lowest common multiple between 12 and 8, look at the biggest, multiply by 2. If multiplying by 2 didn't work, multiply by 3, and so on. Check it that way. That's a quick way of doing it. And if you get there quickly, well, then that's fine. You don't need to go any further. However, if the numbers are more complicated, this mightn't be possible. So the key to finding the LCM, the lowest common multiple, is actually finding the greatest common denominator first. Okay, so if we were to do this methodically with 12 and 8, that would go like this. So you look at the 12 and the 8 and you say, how are we making up this 12? It's 8 multiplied by 1 plus 4. Then we say, okay, take this down. We'll say, what is the 8 made up of? It's 4 multiplied by 2. And we don't have to add anything extra on. So this is working to some neat level. Therefore, we know that the greatest common denominator for 12 and 8 is actually 4. And then a methodical way of finding the LCM is taking the two factors you're looking at, 12 and 8, and divide it by the greatest common denominator. And of course, you get your LCM to be 24. So that's a methodical way of doing it if you can't do it in your head. So let's see if this works for some more complicated numbers. Okay, so say you have 98 and 56 and you need to find the LCM, the lowest common multiples of these two. So this isn't something that mightn't be straight away obvious in your head. Counting up factors in the, if you take 98 and try and count that up in your head and find an LCM where 56 might fit in, you could be there all day trying to do that in your head. So again, what do we need to do first in order to find the LCM? We need to find the greatest common denominator. How do we do that? We take 98 and we say that's 56 multiplied by 1 plus an additional 42 would need to be added on. Then we take the second factor, which is 56, and we say to ourselves, okay, with this 42 then, how is that made up? So it would be 42 multiplied by 1, and we would have to add 14. So we then take that down. So we now have the 42 sorted out, and we need to bring the 14 down and see if there's anything we can do with that. And we say that, okay, we have 42, we have 14. How many times does that go in? It goes 3 times, and it goes evenly, which is great. We're now at a solution, which means we don't have to add anything else on because it goes in evenly. So therefore, our greatest common denominator of 98 and 56 is 14, and now our lowest common multiple is an easy worked out formula where we have the 98 and the 56 divided by the greatest common denominator, which we now know to be 14. We worked that out. This is what I did. I said 14 divided by 7 is 2, 56 divided by 7 is 8, and then I could obviously further divide then by 2 into 2 goes once, 2 into 8 goes 4 times, 98 by 4 is 392 is the LCM, the lowest common multiple of 98 and 56. And to prove that, 56 multiplied by 7 will give us an even 392. So this is definitely the LCM.